hymn that we just sang about Jesus breaking the bread of life by the Sea of Galilee, the occasion for that song was when 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish were given to Jesus by a child. They were blessed by Jesus and then shared with 5,000 people, all of whom we are told were satisfied. That story of blessed bread resonates with our communion meal, the bread that is broken, the cup that is shared. Breaking bread with people was so central to Jesus' ministry that when he came to his Last Supper, that one on the night just before he was arrested and put on trial and executed, that memorial meal that we just shared here with cups of grape juice and cubes of bread, Jesus asked them, and he asks us too, to do this in remembrance of me. Remember me when you break this bread. Remember me when you drink this cup. And yes, as St. Paul says to the Corinthians, we remember his death, but we also remember his life-giving spirit ever after. This bread, he said, is my body broken for you. Take, eat, this is the body of Christ. Those words are over 1,000 years old. They're part of the canon of the Mass, the Eucharist, the liturgical communion. But I would like us to consider something bigger and deeper and earlier than the consecrated bread as the body of Christ. I see the church itself as the living body of Christ, more so than that sacrament is. The body of Christ is not on that plate, it's in this place. The body of Christ is made up of you and me and all other Christians. Together, we are the body of Christ. Individually, we are members of it. Now, over the past 3 weeks, I've spoken about the church in personal and in social gospel terms. And I personally experienced going to church as a positive thing that feeds my soul. It feeds my spiritual needs. It provides a place for creative expression, a place for music, for prayer and preaching, for teaching. Being active in a church is supportive of my life. And it also challenges me to do more for other people. It makes me want to make more of a difference in our society. Without the church regularly reminding me of these deeper spiritual values, I could become complacent. I could become self-absorbed. Attending worship steadies my course. I also see church as an institution that helps people with their problems, accompanies them through their transitions in life, from birth with baptism, through raising children, confirmation, to celebrating marriages and dealing with the demands of adulthood, and eventually helping us to confront death and grief in a way that is hopeful and healing. I love the church. I would love to see it flourish to the glory of God. On this first Sunday of our stewardship campaign, I can't help but think how a person's financial support of the church arises out of the spirit of gratitude for what it has done for us in the past. People who have come through difficulties with the help of their faith community give their support to the church. They appreciate God's work in their lives. They know that without the church they would be less. I know I would be less. Some of our earlier members, like Olive Steele, the Pfeifenbergers, the Bessers, Andrew Comstock, of course, Jenny Kerr, they've left legacy bequests to us for us to use in their name, in their memory, because they appreciated what the church had done for them in their lifetime, and they anticipated that their church, our church, would continue to help others in the future. And so right now I say, bless them all. Belonging to a church was an expression of their personal confidence in the Christian faith in general, and their loyalty to this particular congregation. That's the way it is for many of us, I'm sure. Do you know, with 25 various churches, with various theologies and various worship styles in and around Alpena, a prospective church visitor might wonder which one is the right one for me. Well, that depends on what you're looking for. Some people look for a particular brand of church. We are Congregational and United Church of Christ. And if that matters to a person, we're it. First Congregational, UCC, is the only Congregational United Church of Christ in Alpena. I mean, you can go north to Sheboygan or you can go inland to Atlanta, but we're the only one here. We're the only one that's even near. But fortunately, we can also be the church home for people who were raised in other faith traditions. Catholics and Lutherans, Nazarene, Methodists, Presbyterian, Reformed. The historical marker that's on our front lawn points out that when we were founded on March 2nd of 1862, the founders chose to be congregational because, and I quote, "we promoted the acceptance of people of all faiths." Now, we did that 157 years ago, and we still do today. Whoever you are welcome here. Now, sometimes it's not the kind of church, but rather the church's location which prompts a visit. The building is convenient to a person's home, or it has beautiful architecture, neo-Gothic concrete masonry like ours with stained glass windows or high vaulted ceiling, or they like its symbolic location, that it's downtown near the center of town. Some people tell me that this space seems sacred. When they first come into this building, it suggests there's something in this 1955 building style that resonates with their childhood, something that inspired them then in a classic sanctuary back home. And it's been reproduced for us here and has been for 64 years. Of course, the fact that songs and prayers and weddings and funerals and sermons and children's activities have taken place in this space has also hallowed these walls over time. It makes them more beautiful than ever. Often in a smaller town like ours, there's strong family ties to a certain congregation. For example, you folks were very welcoming to Patty and me when we first arrived here in Alpena a little over 6 years ago. In part, I think, it's because you knew my mom, Dodie. You knew her for more than 50 years. And you apparently liked her, and you were willing to extend that goodwill toward me, her son, trusting that even though I came from Southern California, the nut wasn't going to fall far from the tree. Family ties and memories are strong in local churches. We grew up with certain hymns and prayers, and because of those deep family ties and those long memories, we don't like folks rewriting our old hymns with new words, right? So some people seek a certain brand of a church, the mission and the reputation it has in the community, or the location of the church is right for them, or the families and the friends that you meet at church are your kinds of folks. Variables like these draw strangers to come visit inside these walls. But what is it that keeps us coming? Because preaching plays such a large role in congregational worship, some of you have been very kind to say that my sermons, that is my capacity to speak to the hearts and minds of you, the listeners, is what keeps you coming year in and year out. Some have said such things as, "I like your style of delivery," or "You keep my interest all the way through," or "That sermon gave me so much to think about last week," or "I thought you were speaking directly to me," or "You make Bible stories come alive," or "I learned so much." See, those kinds of words mean a great deal to me because it indicates that there's something in my preaching that enhances our church and the ministry of our church all that much more. But I don't want our success as a congregation to really depend on me. It's got to be more. There's a lot more than just me. It's really all of us working together with God. Of course, since we're talking about church worship, we cannot ignore the role of music. Because worship calls upon much more than the intellect, music has a central place in many Christian congregations. In addition to singing hymns like we do, our excellent organ, our grand piano, the robed choir, occasional special guests like Wild Rose Band, and in 2 weeks the bifocal brass, that all enriches our community corporate worship immeasurably. People who like to sing in a choir like Ted Sherwood, or who like to play instruments like Lee Copeland, or simply like to listen to gospel music, they often will select their church based on the quality and opportunities of the music program. And that's why we invest in having Kat Tomaszewski here. And that's why Cat invites bands like the Wild Rose or the guitarist Dan Ager or the Bifocal Brass to lift us and move our worship into new heights. Of course, sometimes, as I spoke about 2 weeks ago, people join a particular church because it provides a channel for their personal commitments to certain social issues, some core principles. The moral stance that's indicated by our peace pole in the side yard, or our designation as a just peace church, that may speak to a person. Or being open to and affirming of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered people may be an important public witness. I mean, there are, after all, numerous churches who are not at all open to gay and lesbian and transgender people. We in the UCC affirm them as whole human beings made in the image of God. Or it may be the respect that we show to interfaith solidarity, respect to both Islam and Judaism, and even mythology for that matter, as shown by the class that Reverend Ginny Titus recently led. It may be our efforts toward anti-racism and white fragility during the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend, or an Earth Day emphasis on climate justice, or prison reform, or attention to basic human rights. The kinds of issues that are addressed publicly in our national setting in the UCC. These may strike a responsive chord in some people, and it will bring to us those who are working on matters of social justice, people who might otherwise reject church, because a lot of institutional religion is seen as part of the problem instead of part of a solution. I believe that we, as an educated and activist church, can help correct that misunderstanding. Those kinds of public issues, especially in an election year, tend to either draw people